Hi, everybody. I don't know if anybody is on yet, but of course, I know a lot of people get these on the replay. So, hello to everyone watching on the replay. Let me know in the comments if you are watching live or if you're watching on the replay. I know, usually I schedule these and on the weekends, and we're all busy on the weekends. So Sunday morning, it is 11 o'clock here where I am. So we'll wait for a few people to hop on. Let me know how your weekend is going. If you can hear the hum in the background, it is way too hot for me to turn off my air conditioning, so I'm just leaving it. Matthew's upstairs, and I don't want him to cook while I'm doing this. So, yeah, we're going to do a double discussion today. It's just going to be me. It's really hard to, coordinate people that are on different timelines and all of that. Like most people are in the US, some people are in the UK, and it's so hard to get people together to do these discussions. So I'm just going to share my thoughts, and I'm hoping you guys will throw it in the comments as well. And again, let me know if you're watching it on the replay, and let me know your thoughts on these two books in the comments on the replay as well. So yeah, doing a double discussion because the July book, I didn't do a live show in August for obvious reasons. If you didn't know, I did have abdominal surgery in July, and my recovery did not go very well. I ended up back in the hospital with some post-op infections, and it was right at the end of July. So August I just took as kind of a complete healing time. So I figured, okay, well, what I'll do, I'll mash these two books into one discussion. And before we get into the fall reads, so I still do have to do the announcement video for the fall picks, so October, November, December. And I do have them here. I just haven't filmed the video yet. So that should be coming out here in the next couple of days for what we're going to be reading in the fall. And of course, the September read, which we're into September now, unbelievingly, is The House of 100. The House of 100 Whispers by Graham Masterton. I haven't started it yet. I'm going to leave it towards the end of the month because I'm concentrating on vampires right now for Vamptember. So let me know if you're reading anything for Vamptember as well. So yeah, getting right into the discussion. So the first book, the July book, of course, was The Swallow by Charis Cotter, and I did have it pulled up here. I believe this is my third or fourth book that I've read by her now. She is a Canadian author, and she's originally from Toronto, where this book took place. But then she moved to Newfoundland, which is my home province, way out on the East Coast. And her stories are fantastic. I really enjoy her stories. So the first one that I read by her was called Screech, Ghost Stories from Old Newfoundland, which has a lot of folklore in it. So I really enjoyed that one. I still have it up on the shelf. And then I read The Ghost Road and The Dollhouse, a ghost story. So she does write a lot of ghost stories. She's very much along the same sort of range as Betty Wren Wright and Mary Downing Hahn. But her ghost stories usually often contain a lot of mysteries in them as well. So like middle grade kids solving mysteries. And usually it has to do with ghost stories. Like The Ghost Road it has a lot of folklore wrapped into that story, and Newfoundland fairies, which fairy lore is very, very prominent in Newfoundland. And only certain people can see this ghost road. And so this young girl comes to Newfoundland from Toronto, and it's a real culture shock for her. And she has to kind of go along the road of fairies and all of that kind of thing. So I really enjoyed that one by her. Hi, Stina. Hope you're having a good day. And then The Dollhouse was another one that was pretty good. And then this one is actually the first one that I heard of by her, but I ended up getting to the other ones first. And this one has been on my shelf for quite some time. And she actually has a new mystery out right now. It just came out this May. It's called the Mystery of the Dance Hall, I believe. And so I wanted to read that one too. So, yeah, just a little bit of background on the author. She's very, very nice. I did get autographed copies from her for my library and also for Cameron Chaney. I sent them off to him, I believe, as a birthday gift one year. And so I do really enjoy her writing. So this particular book, The Swallow, a Ghost Story. So kind of a funny title, but as you're getting into the story, you kind of realize what's going on and why it's called that. So, yeah, just kind of a quick synopsis. We have these two young girls. They live next to each other, and they realize that their attics are kind of joined, and they become friends. And they have a cemetery that's right next to their house. And, excuse me, they find that one of the girls, her name is written on one of the headstones. And then they unleash this whole mystery of one of the girls and her family, and they're trying to unravel what had gone on. So for me, this was, I would say, a 4.25 star read. I really enjoyed this book. Like I said, I do enjoy Charis Cotter's writing. And I think out of all of them that I had read, I think this one is probably my second favorite. So The Ghost Road is probably my most favorite because like it has so much Newfoundland lore wrapped into it, and it reminds me so much of home. So it's more of the nostalgia factor with that one. And that one is two cousins, actually, who have to unravel this mystery of their family. So she writes very much the same kind of stories like that. So this one is two girls that are living next to each other, and they're unraveling this mystery. So I specifically picked this one up because I did ghosty reads all summer, which is one thing, but I also wanted to, because it was July, it was my birthday month, and Charis Cotter is a Canadian author. I wanted to support a Canadian author for July, for Canada Day. And yeah, so this read was really, really good for me. I thought it was a fantastic adventure. And the reason why I went with 4.25, I was kind of fighting between the 4 and the 5 star for this one. I wasn't sure where I was going to put it. It wasn't a 5 star read by any means, but it was something that I thoroughly enjoyed. I found myself, I sunk deeper and deeper as the mystery started to unravel, but I just found it to be very front heavy with a lot of setup and a lot of story before it actually got into what was going on with the mystery. And I understand why she did that. I think it just could have been condensed a little bit. So that's why I went with 4.25 for that one. So let me know what you guys thought of it. So Stina says, I really enjoyed it. Landed on 4.5. So we're around the same. It was definitely a fun mystery. I really enjoy reads like this during the summer. They're just fun kind of popcorn reads. There's nothing too heavy about it, which is different from the August read. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one. So let's get into the plot and characters. So usually for these discussions, if you're new, I don't get in too heavily with like answering certain questions or anything like that. It's just more of an overall discussion of what we thought. So I was a little bit worried at the beginning of this book because, and I do this with every single one of her books, because of course they're middle grade and they can be, a little bit, they can be a little bit young when they're talking about dynamics between kids and dynamics between families and stuff like that. And I found at the very beginning, it was very much, when it was setting up Polly's story specifically, it was very much with like, the nicknames that she had for her brothers and sisters. And she acted out quite a lot with her family and all of that kind of stuff. She kind of seemed a little bit bratty, if you will. And so I was kind of thinking at the beginning, I was like, oh, I hope these aren't going to be characters that I just dislike the whole way through. And it wasn't. Like it was just kind of setting up that whole story. And once we got into the two girls meeting, Polly kind of settled out a little bit, and she very much just got into the mystery. So I did enjoy that. So we have one girl, Polly, who has a humongous, boisterous family, and she finds it hard, like where she's fitting in. Like her parents don't really pay attention to her because there's so many of them in the house. And then the other girl, Rose, who is next door, it's only her mom and dad, and their housekeeper. And so she is very much alone. And it is very cute when these two girls get together, and, they're kind of different upbringings. And Polly loves ghost stories. She wants to be able to see ghosts, and Rose can see ghosts, and she doesn't want to see them anymore. They're scary, and they're kind of they kind of torment her and stuff. So we have this whole kind of lead up in the beginning of the story that is. Polly is pretty much convinced that Rose is a ghost. She's very, very pale. She has dark hair, dark circles under her eyes. She's very thin and frail, and she's a little bit weird. I guess Polly would say that she's a little bit not like her and her brothers and sisters. She's a little bit more subdued. She's a little bit more introverted. So I found that whole storyline of Polly wondering if Rose is a ghost. It kind of was very repetitive for a little bit, but it wasn't too overbearing. I didn't mind it. And then we have the two girls. Once they meet and they figure each other out, they find in the cemetery by their house, they're looking at the headstones and stuff, and they find that Rose, whose full name is Winifred Rose McPherson, her name is on a tombstone, but it's not the dates that she was born. So that even convinces Polly even more so that Rose is a ghost. So Polly is all excited because she's finally seeing a ghost, and her twin brothers actually call Rose the ghost girl because she has that sort of ethereal sort of appearance. So really, really fun interaction between the two of them. And this kind of opens up the mystery of like, what's going on with this headstone that has Rose's name, her full name on the headstone. And then in the course of it, we find out that Rose had an aunt, so her father's sister, who had the exact same name. But she had never heard of this girl before. Her parents have never spoken of her really before, so she's kind of wondering what's going on. So she wants to unravel the mystery, and then of course we have Polly, who's very much still on the Rose as a ghost sort of aspect. So I found that I was bouncing back and forth between, I wonder, is Rose actually a ghost or is she real? I wasn't too sure myself. I didn't figure out the mystery until it actually kind of started to unravel at the end of the story. I didn't figure it out at all. Let me know if you guys had figured out what was going on there. And then the whole sort of thing with the swallow starts to become evident, because there is an old folkloric song called The Swallow that we actually used to, I mean, all Newfoundland children know it, that we used to sing when we were kids. It is a very East Coast sort of song about a swallow flying so high, and all of this kind of stuff. So Rose starts to sing this song, and Polly can hear her on the other side of the wall in their attic, and she's kind of mesmerized by this and stuff. So then we find out that Rose actually had a bit of a fall in the summertime, and she went into the hospital. And that, coupled with the fact that she never really sees her parents a whole lot, kind of adds into this whole, like, is Rose a ghost sort of thing? Like, she doesn't see her parents. She only ever sees her housekeeper. Nobody else is around. Nobody pays attention to her at school. And she had this fall where she can't remember a whole lot. And she went into the hospital. So then the two girls are convinced that kind of Rose died when she was in the hospital, because her memory is not very strong. So that kind of added to the whole ghost lore, especially because the only person that she can talk to is her housekeeper, Kendrick, who, when I was picturing it, I don't know if anybody else did this, but I was kind of getting very much like a Mrs. Danvers kind of feel from Kendrick. She's very secretive. She's very subdued. She's a no-nonsense kind of older lady and stuff like that. So we had kind of that extra level of this spooky housekeeper going on, which is so funny that we had this spooky housekeeper like in sort of a modern day home in the middle of a city in the middle of Toronto. Um, this took place in the 60s. I believe it was 63. So when I say modern day, I mean it just wasn't in Victorian times. Also kept going back and forth the clues and red herrings. Yeah, they were very clever. They were very, very clever. And I think that's part of the reason why I got so swallowed up into this mystery. And, for a middle grade book, like usually you can start to figure out what's going on, but I really didn't. I couldn't figure it out until it actually started to unravel towards the end of the book. So I thought that was fantastic because if I couldn't figure it out, then middle grade kids who are reading this story or YA kids who are reading this story are definitely not going to figure it out. And I think this was really relatable for a lot of kids because you have the juxtaposition with Polly and Rose, with the one kid who has this huge boisterous family, and she's very extroverted, she loves to eat, she loves life, she has vivacity and stuff like that. And then you have Rose, who's very subdued, very introverted. But in both cases you have girls who feel very alone, and they kind of grasp onto one another. And you can kind of see each of their lives kind of spilling over into the other girl's life. Like once we get towards the end of the book, Rose is realizing that she loves to eat. She can get enjoyment out of eating like Polly did. There was one point where they asked Kendrick to make her bacon and eggs and buckwheat pancakes, which is so funny because I have buckwheat pancakes every single Sunday. Instead of just having a bland bowl of porridge. And that came from Polly because Polly loved to eat, and there was always cookies and chocolate cake and all of that kind of stuff that she would be munching on as they were trying to solve this mystery. So you can kind of see this sort of development, and they really added to each other's lives. And obviously with the outcome of it, Rose was it was a real coming of age for Rose. And I think she took a lot kind of going forward. Afterwards, she would have been a little bit more happy and a little bit more sparkly and just a little bit more enjoyment for life that she would have gotten from her friendship with Polly. So I really enjoyed the interaction between these two girls. I found it wasn't overly immature. Like I said, at the very, very beginning, I found it a little bit with Polly's side, but as the friendship started to develop and it started to get more in depth into the mystery, I really loved these two little girls. And I know, like, if I was a kid reading this, I really would enjoy this story, and I would have loved to have a friend who lived next door, be able to have that kind of really close connection and really add to each other's lives and go on a mystery. So I found it really, really fun. And like, the world kind of sucks right now, and to be able to sink into a story like this, I found really, really good. Like, I don't want my entertainment right now to have any kind of politics, any kind of war, any kind of like depressing kind of content. I want to have like really fun mysteries. So this really did it for me at this time. And like, I was going through a crappy time too with my surgery and all the infections, and I was getting poked and prodded, and I had IVs in both arms, and it was really awful time. And I think this story really helped me kind of get my spirits up when I was reading it. So I read it kind of at a perfect time. So let me know if you enjoyed the interactions between the two girls and their friendship. I thought it was really, really well written. And so yeah, getting into the actual mystery itself. So we learn that, like I said, Rose has an aunt who the family tried to like erase her from their history. And of course, that's always interesting, and it is very, very much you know, a, um, a commonplace in Gothic reads where you have these mysteries that need to be unraveled, and people grow as they're unraveling them. So, even though it's a middle grade book, it really had all of those Gothic elements, like not so much the atmosphere, but just the unraveling of the mystery and family dynamics and stuff like this. So, we find out that. Rose's aunt, Winnie, um, is very much like her. They found some old letters that talk about how she was very disruptive as a child, because she would go from being very, very quiet to throwing things around. And we find out it's because she could see ghosts as well. And so can Rose. So we have this whole kind of shift with Rose worrying about, is she going to turn out like her aunt, and are they going to lock her away, because her aunt was supposed to go to an institution for mentally disturbed people because of her behavior. And she starts to get really worried that she's going to have to be sent away as well. And her parents don't talk to her, so she thinks that they don't love her and they don't want to have anything to do with her because they're so wrapped up in their work and they're so busy. And yeah, so I really enjoyed the mystery. Yeah, it was a lovely escape. And did you enjoy the mystery too, Stina? I really enjoyed this one of the two girls that had the same name. And then, of course, we have Polly's brothers who were talking about the ghost girl next door, but they're not seeing Rose, they're seeing Winnie, even though they look almost exactly the same. So when they're telling Polly to stay away from the girl next door, they ended up actually getting the two wires crossed. So that was a really cool twist in there too, that they were actually seeing Winnie and not Rose. So I really enjoyed that aspect. And then, of course, the girls are finding old clothes and old shoes and stuff like that in Rose's house, which used to be her grandmother's house. So, like, they have all kinds of, like, attic treasures, I guess you would call them, like old dresses and old shoes. And there's a locked box with secrets in it. And they start finding these pictures of swallows that Winnie was drawing when she was a child, and she would sort of draw them every year. And it was because she was, very much confined to her bedroom, and she would just draw these swallows as a sign of hope. That someday she would, kind of break free from this gift that she had to see ghosts. And looping into that, we have Polly and Rose. Whenever they would go to Rose's house, Polly would sort of get attacked a little bit by what they called the door jumper, which was Winnie's spirit, but like when she was like kind of dark and when she was mad, and she would knock Polly over. And we find out at the end there's a specific reason for that, so we'll get to that. So I enjoyed the ghost aspect. And they were finding photo albums and stuff like this where there would be a picture, but the picture was removed. And so they start to unravel the history of Winnie, and we find out that the reason why they tried to just kind of forget about her is because she had an accident and she died. And her brother, who's Rose's father, witnessed it, and he blamed himself for a long time because she got hit by a car and ended up falling off a bridge and dying. And the family was already kind of in the dumps because of Winnie's behavior and stuff like this. So there was a lot of sadness on one side of Rose's side, and they just wanted to forget everything. And so we have Polly coming into the picture, like I said, boisterous, and she's trying to figure out this mystery as well. And then when we get to the actual twist of the story, where we find out that Polly is, obviously this is a spoiler discussion, where Polly is the actual ghost. So the two girls ended up having meningitis during the previous summer. And this is why Rose can sort of remember going into the hospital. But then when she comes out, everybody is really upset and they're sad, and they kind of pull away from her. So it's kind of her family's trait to kind of pull away from everyone and just try to bury things and forget about things instead of just facing it and dealing with it. And then we find out the reason that Rose can see Polly is because Polly is the actual ghost. And I thought that was, like I said, I didn't figure it out at all, even though right from the synopsis of the book, it talks about how Rose can see ghosts. So this was very much a Sixth Sense sort of thing. And you would think, since I had seen the Sixth Sense so many times, that I would have figured this out, but I really didn't. It was right up until the very end that I didn't realize what was going on. So once they figure out that Polly actually died the previous summer during the meningitis epidemic, we find out that Polly's mom actually goes to Rose's house because she thinks that Rose has been stealing all the cookies and cake in her bag and stuff like this. And they have an interaction between the parents, where Polly's mom kind of has a little bit of a breakdown because of Polly's death. And then Rose's mom had lost a baby just a few months before. So they really start to connect. And, it really opens up the floodgate of, number one, Rose finally kind of comes out of her shell and tells her parents, like, you don't pay attention to me. You don't see me. Like, nobody sees me. I'm like, if I feel like I'm a ghost, and she thinks that she died the summer before, but her parents tell her, of course you didn't die. There was just a family tragedy. And again, they tried to bury it instead of trying to deal with it. And it was just that whole friendship and interaction between Rose and Polly that sort of, allowed Rose to have that coming of age moment and breaking the cycle of grief and how her family deals with grief. And so they, her parents, of course, changed their ways because they realize what they're doing. And Rose, like I said, finds kind of this vivacity for life. Like, she realizes that she loves to eat because of Polly, and she loves to read, and she loves just, actually living. I feel like there was one part I was forgetting. But anyway, I'm sure I'll think of it. So we kind of have this real coming of age moment for Rose, and I thought it was so good. Oh, the two brothers. So the brothers that Polly had actually had verbal conversations with, we find out that they can see ghosts as well, and that's the reason why they were seeing Winnie. So we have Polly's brothers, and then we realize that Polly isn't actually interacting with anybody else in the family except her two brothers who can see ghosts, and her baby sister who starts to say her name. And then, of course, we figure out towards the end that it's because babies are more open to spiritual activities, so she could see Polly as well. But Polly hadn't actually had interactions with either one of her parents since the day that she threw the tantrum at the table, and that was the day she ended up getting sick with meningitis. And then, of course, it didn't go well for her. So that's pretty much it. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. I love the story here between the two girls, the friendship between the two girls. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't written very immaturely. I thought it was very maturely written. The mystery was fantastic. The family dynamic was fantastic. And the coming of age moment for Rose at the end was brilliant. And I just love that these two young girls, like, they love books and they're very intelligent and they're just having fun. So this was a great escape for me, and I hope if you enjoyed this, or if you chose to read this book for the book club, that you enjoyed it too. I really enjoyed this one. Of all the books that we read for the book club, this was one of my favorites, I have to say. So I often struggle a little bit with family dynamics in books because sometimes it's overbearing and it's too much and there's too much drama, and I want it to get back to the core story. But I found that this family dynamic really added to the story. And of course, it was intertwined with the whole mystery anyway. So I did find it really, really enjoyable, and it was well balanced. It was a well-written story, and she brought everything around and tied it up in a pretty little bow, and you have the situation with Rose can actually speak to Winnie, who wanted to apologize to Rose's father because he witnessed her dying back in the day. This is the part that I forgot to mention. So Rose actually helps heal her entire family because of her gift when she tells her father that, hey, your sister really wants you to know it wasn't your fault. She's so sorry that you witnessed it. You know, even if you did try to help, it wouldn't have changed the outcome. And so Rose ends up healing not her only her own family, but she ends up healing Polly and Polly's family as well with her gift, which she wanted to get rid of. So I really enjoyed that aspect. It was a very, very well written story. I really love this. Like I said, and the more I think about it, it's like, would I have stuck with it 4.25? I'm going to leave it at a 4.25, but it was definitely more than a 4, but less than a 5 for me. And I will definitely recommend this book to anybody who's kind of looking for a really fun ghost story with uh, a mystery wrapped into it. I love ghost stories with mysteries. They're fantastic. And this was a quick read for me. I gobbled it up, even though it was 300 pages. So I will definitely read more of Charis Cotter. Like I said, this was the fourth book I've read by her. And there's a new one that just came out, which I definitely will be getting to soon. So I will definitely keep recommending her on the channel, because you guys know that I love ghost stories so much. And July and August for me were mostly ghost stories that I read, and I'll be doing a recent reads wrap up here really, really soon and tell you about the other ghost stories that I read, because some of them were really, really good. And I was pleased with all of my reads, but this one is definitely towards the top. So let's get into the August book, which was A Shadow on the Wall by Jonathan Atcliffe. Now, I only just finished this book yesterday. I found it really dragged for me. I did give it 3 stars. I thought it was okay, but I found it to be a little bit boring, which is strange because it has that whole occult element wrapped into it and the religious horror aspect wrapped into it. But I found, even though it was beautifully written, there wasn't a whole lot of substance to this one until towards the say 2/3 mark to the end. I really struggle through the first 2/3 of this book, and I think, I'm not sure, but if this wasn't a a book club read, I might have just laid it down. So beautifully written. Like I said, it was a 3-star read because of what had happened in the last third of the book, but there wasn't a whole lot. Like, when we're talking about characters and character development, like the last book that we spoke of, there was a whole lot of interaction between the 2 girls. You had a whole lot of development. There was the coming of age element and all of this. But in this story, it was very flat. Like, we had Professor Atcliffe, who is the main character, and then the Athertons. So we have the one Atherton brother who had died, and then his other brothers trying to figure out what had happened. So they're kind of the main characters with some other secondary characters thrown in, but it was very flat. Like, there wasn't a whole lot of development until, like I said, we got to the 2/3 mark of the way through the book, and then Atcliffe meets Simone, who he gets engaged to, and that's really it seemed like the only thing that gave him any kind of development or any kind of personality was when he met Simone, and it did discuss like his feelings for her, and how much he loved her, and kind of that sort of thing. But yeah, the first 2/3 of this book really, really dragged for me. So we have Matthew Atherton, who seeks out Asquith to figure out what's going on at the church, Thornham St. Stephen, because his brother was the rector or the priest or whatever there, and he died basically under mysterious circumstances. So when they found him, basically he was kneeling, and he looked like, well, the girl who I believe was his housekeeper or whatever, they believed that he had seen the devil because of the expression on his face, and he just kind of dropped dead. So reading it at night, and it's too creepy. It is very creepy. It does have that creepy element, and I think that's one of the reasons why I kind of stuck with this one, because I really did want to figure out what was going on. So basically, Edward Atherton, who died, said that he was going to renovate this church, and they ended up disturbing a tomb of an abbot, William de Lindsay, who was buried there. And after they disturbed the his burial chamber or whatever, all kinds of things start happening. And then because Professor Asquith kind of gets involved with what's going on with this family, he starts experiencing some things with his family, and then the Athertons are experiencing a lot of deaths and stuff like that too, because it seems like the spirit of this abbot is haunting them. So, like I said, it was pretty good. I really like the occult elements in this book. I like the story. I would like to read a little bit more of the Bible passages that they mentioned in here. I think it was mainly out of the book of Ezekiel, which I don't know the Bible well enough to, be able to relate it unless I was actually looking into it. And so, the normal story, the normal story of you're renovating, you disturb something, and now you're haunted. So it's a story we've heard 100 times before, but we do have that very Gothic sort of writing, Gothic sort of elements in this one. And then, these are intellectual people trying to figure out something supernatural. So that's always a little bit of an interesting angle. Oh, sorry, I thought we had a new comment. So yeah, kind of dragged up until the men sort of meet up again. And then we find out that the Athertons are very much being haunted. And now Edward and Matthew's mother, Mrs. Atherton, has fallen deathly ill. And she keeps saying that she has seen her son, Edward. And she eventually dies. And then between the other Atherton son and Asquith, they start to try to figure out what's going on here. Now, this book is a little bit hard to follow at certain points, because I don't know if maybe some chapter titles were missing. I'm not really too sure, because it did flip kind of point of views where they were talking about William de Lindsay getting involved in the occult. And it was kind of a very quick switch, I found. It was very, very quick. And I kind of had to stop. I was working on the library, actually, and I kind of had to stop and figure out what was going on. And I hated that, because it was like, I was following this trajectory, and then all of a sudden it moved to something else. So I did find it a little bit hard when it kind of switched POVs for a bit. And I found it like it switched POVs to what was happening with William de Lindsay, and then it switched right back to the main story, but it was very jarring. And it happened kind of like at that 2/3 kind of mark in the book. And I hate when I have to stop and try to think about what's going on. But I did read this on audio, and like I said, maybe there were some chapter titles that were missing. I'm not really too sure. So it could have just been the medium that I was reading it in. Hi, Angela. Been a while since I've read something straightforward and it's occult. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I really did enjoy the occult aspect of this book. I just wish it wasn't so monotone, and it wasn't like it just needed to have a little bit more oomph for me. So we find out that William de Lindsay is involved. Basically, so he becomes sort of this occultish Christian, I guess you would say, or he starts like incorporating witchcraft basically into his beliefs to punish non-believers, basically. And so that was sort of an interesting aspect. I just really wish they had concentrated on that a little bit. Like I said, they started going down that path of where they were explaining things happening, and then they switched back to just the monotone stuff going on with Asquith, and then he had his marriage to Simone and what was going on with them. So I just really wish they had stuck with that path that they were going down with DeLindsey, and explained it, just kind of developed it a little bit more. Enjoy the paranormal and mystery elements. Yeah, that would be really cool if that church actually exists, or if he based it off of an actual existing church or an actual existing myth or some folklore, which he kind of took inspiration from. That would be really, really cool. So I started to actually get into this story when Asquith meets his fiance. I found that, even though she was sort of a minor character, she actually brought a little bit of personality to this story. And it kind of gave it a little bit of a lift, I guess you would say, because I was thinking for a long time that this is very flat, it's very boring, it's very dry, even with those occult elements wrapped in around. So then we find out that Simone's son, Bertrand, and I actually have notes written down here, which is not something I typically do with books, but like I said, I found it so flat and so unentertaining in a lot of places that I would forget people's names. So I had to write those down. But then Bertrand starts to see the ghost of William DeLindsey as well. So he, I forget how Asquith says that he pronounces his name, but so we're starting to see kind of the ghost of Edward Atherton and the ghost of DeLindsey are kind of showing up in poor Asquith's life, and he has to try to figure out how he's going to expel it. So first, Bertrand gets really, really sick. I believe he gets sick first, and then Simone falls deathly ill as well. And then Asquith takes it upon himself that he's going to go back to Thornham St. Stephen and figure out what the heck is going on with this abbot and the occult elements that are wrapped in on it, and how he can get rid of it. Yeah, I did too. Okay, so I'm glad I wasn't the only one that thought that way. I thought that she brought the most personality to the story. She was really the only one I gave a crap about too. Asquith and Atherton, I found them they just droned on, and they were very, very boring. So I'm really glad that the author decided to put this kind of side story in, which usually I'm like, if there's a romance element to like a gothic story or a horror story, sometimes I'm like, oh, did they really have to put that in? But I found that this actually really did add to the story. So I'm glad that you found that too. So my biggest thing with this book was that it didn't really start to get even remotely interesting until 2/3 into the book. And then I believe I had 20 minutes left of reading, so not very much, where they actually start to get into the meat and bones of Asquith going and trying to figure out what's going on with the occult. And they find he actually manages to decode the engraving on the tomb. And he finds out that the occult is very much wrapped into that, and then the story that he had brought back, what they thought was a Baphomet from abroad that they were using in these kind of witchcraft occulty sort of prayers. But I forget the name of the god now, but it ends up being a statue of an Egyptian god. And he ends up finding it, kind of unraveling the mystery. He finds it and he destroys it. And to me, it was just so flat. The story was just flat. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now he's back at the church. He destroys the relic, and that's it. And that came, like I said, with the last 20 minutes of the book that I had been reading. And I'm like, okay, well, it was very front heavy again, with like the setup to the story, setup. And then it was like that and it was over. So I don't know if anybody else found that it was the ending was very, very quick. So it was like they did all of this setup and almost ran out of time, or maybe it was the editor that edited it down to take out a lot of stuff. I'm not really too sure, but I just found that the template of this story was it was really interesting and it was really good, but I thought it could have been written better. I think they could have left a lot of the monotony out with Asquith and Atherton, and actually concentrated a little bit more. Maybe they could have introduced Simone a little bit sooner and had that story develop a little bit more to give it some meat and bones, and then actually concentrate a little bit more on when the relic was found and how it was used in ritual and what it was used for. I just found that the parts that I was interested in it was too condensed, and I would have liked to see more of that. So, like I said, I gave this book a 3-star. It wasn't fantastic, but I'm glad I read it, and I thought it was really well written. And for the most part, I read this when I was on my walks in the morning. I had started this book and then I set it down for a bit, and then I finished it on these walks that I've been doing in the mornings in the past week or so. And I found it was very relaxing to listen to. I enjoyed the narrator and I enjoyed how it was written. I just wish that those elements had been bolstered a little bit more. So let me know what you guys thought about this one. I think I'll definitely read a little bit more from Jonathan Atcliffe. I did enjoy his writing style. I'll definitely give him another try. But yeah, I like this one, but I was a little bit disappointed. I really wanted a little bit more of those occulty sort of elements. I love religious horror that has the occult wrapped into it. Especially in Gothic books. It very much reminds me of The Last Heir to Blackwood Library, but I found that one was written way better and it concentrated way more on the occult elements than this one did. So, there was some parallels there, but if I had to pick one, I would definitely go with Blackwood Library over A Shadow on the Wall. But overall, still glad that I read it. So let me know what you guys thought. Are you on the same sort of wavelength with the thoughts? Or did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? I can see how some people would kind of find this one to be very, very dry. So if you're not into kind of that slow burn sort of Gothic horror, then you probably wouldn't enjoy this one, but you probably definitely enjoy The Swallow, A Ghost Story, which was our July read that I discussed at the beginning of this show. Enjoying the writing style so I can handle the pacing issues, and I enjoyed the writing style too. So I think that was one of the things that kind of kept me a little bit engaged. But yeah, I think they could have done a little bit more with the story. But I'm glad that they did throw in the Simone angle, because otherwise it would have been very, very flat and very boring, if you ask me. So that's it. The show's been about 48 minutes. So like I said, for anybody who's hopped on since the beginning, we're going to be doing The House of 100 Whispers by Graham Masterton in September. So I haven't gotten to that one yet. I'm concentrating on vampires right now, so I'll be reading it a little bit later in this month. But Lydia from Typical Books of Horror told me that she really enjoyed that one. So I'm kind of excited for it. And again, I'm going to be reading it on audio, and I'm going to be continuing with my 30 days, my 30-day walking challenge. So my plan is to read it while I'm walking early in the morning when it's dark and crisp and kind of spooky out. So I'm really excited about that. And then within the next week or within the next few days, I'm hoping I'm going to be posting the next 3 reads. So for the fall reads, October, November, December, for the book club. So keep an eye out for that. Other than that, Yeah, I want to read The Vampire. I'm not sure if I'm going to fit it into this month, but it's definitely one that I want to read because I know that one's a classic. But I hope you guys enjoyed the show, and let me know what you're reading for Vamptember or watching, because Matthew and I are going to be throwing on some vampire movies here very, very soon. So I'll see you guys in the next live show for The Haunted Victorian. Bye.